Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into one of the most epic, chaotic, and downright fascinating periods in all of history. China's Three Kingdoms. Forget what you think you know from video games and movies, because the real story is even more dramatic. We're talking about the epic collapse of a 400-year-old dynasty, the rise of legendary warlords, and a struggle for the soul of China that would define it for centuries. So, how did we get here? To understand the Three Kingdoms, we have to rewind the clock a bit to the late Han Dynasty. Imagine an empire that had been the center of East Asian civilization for 4 centuries. It was powerful, prosperous, and culturally rich. But by the late 2nd century AD, the cracks were beginning to show. A series of young, ineffective emperors sat on the throne, but the real power was held by corrupt court eunuchs and powerful clans fighting for influence. Out in the provinces, famines and floods were rampant, and the government was too busy with its internal squabbles to offer any real help. The people were suffering, and their resentment was a powder keg waiting for a spark. That spark came in 184 AD with the Yellow Turban Rebellion. This wasn't just a peasant uprising. It was a massive, quasi-religious movement that swept across the country. The rebels, wearing yellow scarves to signify their allegiance to a new, just heaven, threatened to topple the Han Dynasty entirely. The imperial court, in a panic, did something that would change the course of history forever. It gave provincial governors and local strongmen the authority to raise their own armies to crush the rebellion. While this tactic worked and the Yellow Turbans were eventually defeated, it was a fatal mistake. The court had essentially handed over military power to ambitious warlords all over the country. The genie was out of the bottle, and it wasn't going back in. The Han Dynasty was now an empire in name only. Enter the main players of our story. When imperial authority collapsed, China fell into chaos and division, where power alone decided who would prevail. Warlords carved out their own territories, battling each other for land and power. And from this chaos, 3 particularly brilliant and ruthless figures began to emerge. First, in the north, we have Cao Cao. Often portrayed as the cunning villain of the story, the reality is far more complex. Cao Cao was a brilliant military strategist, a gifted poet, and a shrewd administrator. While other warlords were focused on personal glory, Cao Cao had a grander vision. He rescued the last Han emperor, Emperor Xian, in 196 AD. Now, this was a power move. By controlling the emperor, Cao Cao could issue edicts in the emperor's name, giving all his military campaigns a veneer of legitimacy. He wasn't just another rebel. He was supposedly restoring the Han. He consolidated his power over the vast and fertile northern plains, establishing a strong and stable base of operations. He was a practical and visionary leader who valued ability over lineage, carrying out agricultural reforms that sustained both his soldiers and his people, laying a solid foundation for the nation. Meanwhile, in the south, another power was rising. The Sun family, starting with Sun Jian and then his son, Sun Ce, carved out a domain in the rich lands south of the Yangtze River. After Sun Ce's untimely death, his younger brother, the 18-year-old Sun Quan, inherited this burgeoning state. Sun Quan was a wise and patient leader. He knew he couldn't match Cao Cao's northern armies in a head-on fight. Instead, he focused on consolidating his territory, recruiting talented advisors, and building a formidable navy to defend the natural barrier of the Yangtze River. His domain would become the state of Eastern Wu. And then there's our third protagonist, Liu Bei. Compared to Cao Cao and Sun Quan, Liu Bei started with almost nothing. He claimed distant royal ancestry from the Han imperial family, which gave him a powerful claim to legitimacy. He cultivated a reputation for being virtuous, benevolent, and compassionate, a true man of the people. But for years, he was a wanderer, moving from one patron to another, never able to secure a permanent base. His fortunes changed dramatically when he finally recruited the man who would become arguably the most famous strategist in Chinese history, Zhuge Liang. This meeting is legendary. Liu Bei is said to have visited Zhuge Liang's humble cottage 3 times before the reclusive genius finally agreed to serve him. With Zhuge Liang's guidance, Liu Bei's path became clear. Zhuge Liang laid out the Longzhong plan. Liu Bei should seize Jing province as a temporary base and then capture the remote but secure Yi province, modern-day Sichuan. This would give him a defensible territory from which to build his strength. From there, he could form an alliance with Sun Quan in the southeast to jointly resist Cao Cao in the north. This strategy would create a 3-way balance of power, a tripod, giving Liu Bei a fighting chance to one day restore the Han Dynasty. The ultimate showdown was inevitable. In 208 AD, Cao Cao, having unified the north, marched his massive army south with one goal: to crush Liu Bei and Sun Quan and reunite China under his rule. This led to one of the most famous battles in world history, the Battle of Red Cliffs. Liu Bei and Sun Quan, facing overwhelming odds, formed the alliance Zhuge Liang had envisioned. Using clever tactics, fireships, and a favorable wind, the allied fleet of Sun Quan and Liu Bei decimated Cao Cao's massive navy on the Yangtze River. It was a catastrophic defeat for Cao Cao. He was forced to retreat back to the north, his dream of a quick unification shattered. The Battle of Red Cliffs cemented the division of China and officially set the stage for the Three Kingdoms period. Following Red Cliffs, the tripod balance of power that Zhuge Liang had predicted became a reality. In 220 AD, Cao Cao died, and his son, Cao Pi, forced the last Han emperor to abdicate, declaring himself the emperor of the new state of Wei. A year later, Liu Bei, in response, declared himself the emperor of Shuhan, claiming to be the legitimate successor to the Han Dynasty. And in 229 AD, Sun Quan, after years of holding the title of king, finally declared himself the emperor of Wu. The Three Kingdoms were officially born. For the next several decades, these three states Wei in the north, Shu in the west, and Wu in the southeast, were locked in a constant struggle. Zhuge Liang, as the Prime Minister of Shu, launched a series of northern expeditions against Wei, trying to fulfill Liu Bei's dream of restoring the Han. These campaigns are legendary for their strategic brilliance and clever inventions, like the wooden ox and flowing horse for supply transport. But ultimately, Shu was the smallest and weakest of the three states, and these expeditions drained its resources without achieving a decisive victory. Meanwhile, the state of Wei in the north was the most powerful, possessing the largest population and economy. However, after the death of its strong early rulers, power within Wei gradually fell into the hands of one ambitious family, the Sima clan, led by the strategist Sima Yi. Sima Yi was Cao Cao's equal in cunning and ambition, and through a series of political maneuvers and a decisive coup, his family eventually seized control of the Wei court, ruling as regents in all but name. The state of Wu in the southeast, protected by the Yangtze River, enjoyed relative stability and focused on developing its maritime trade and southern territories. But they too were drawn into the constant cycle of alliances and betrayals that defined the era. The delicate balance couldn't last forever. In 263 AD, the Sima-controlled state of Wei launched a surprise invasion of Shu, the Shu Han kingdom. Weakened by internal strife and the immense cost of its northern campaigns, fell quickly. It was the first of the three kingdoms to be extinguished. Just 2 years later, Sima Yi's grandson, Sima Yan, did to the Wei emperor what Cao Pi had done to the Han emperor. He forced him to abdicate and established his own dynasty, the Jin dynasty. Now only 2 kingdoms remained, the powerful Jin dynasty in the north and the kingdom of Wu in the south. For another decade and a half, Wu held on, but its fate was sealed. In 280 AD, the Jin forces launched a massive land and naval invasion. They sailed down the Yangtze, and the kingdom of Wu, plagued by a succession of incompetent rulers, finally surrendered. China was once again unified, this time under the Jin dynasty. The Three Kingdoms period, after 60 years of epic conflict, was over. The legacy of the Three Kingdoms is immense. It was a time of unimaginable destruction and loss of life, but it was also an age of heroes, of brilliant strategy, of unwavering loyalty, and of profound philosophical thought. These stories were passed down through generations, eventually being immortalized in the 14th century historical novel, Romance of the Three Kingdoms, which blended history with folklore to create the legends we know today. Figures like the Honorable Guan Yu, the brilliant Zhuge Liang, and the cunning Cao Cao have become archetypes in East Asian culture. The period has inspired countless operas, TV shows, movies, and video games, cementing its place in the popular imagination. It's a timeless story of ambition, loyalty, and the struggle to shape a nation's destiny in a world turned upside down. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through one of history's most epic eras. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing for more deep dives into history. Let me know in the comments which figure from the three kingdoms you find most fascinating. Until next time, stay curious.